Hello, and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. I'm Chad, your host. This is our fourth episode, and I'm joined tonight by Dave Detjen. Dave, how you doing?
Hey, I'm great, Chad.
Great. Well, great to have you on the show. David and I met a couple of years ago, I think now on Twitter. We were both involved in some music challenges and, sort of found a shared love for Steely Dan and tenor saxophone and all saxophones, I guess. And just had like a really kind of crossover taste in music. So when I started up this thing and I was asking for people to come on and hang out with me, Dave raised his hand. So here we are. So why don't you tell us just a bit about yourself?
Oh yeah, thanks, Chad. I love music. I think in the last 10 or 20 years, I've even gotten into it more. I played a little bit when I was younger. I think you did too. So that I think that's part of it. You get that kind of gets into your blood. And then, as I've gotten older, it's become a real avocation. My dad, who was really into music, would always say, music's a great hobby, but you don't want to make it your livelihood. And I guess I took that, to heart. But at the same time, as I've gotten older, I've really, discovered deep love for a lot of different kind of music and getting more into the nuance and things like that. So I over this past summer, summer of 23, I worked with a partner to put together a Sunday kind of listen thing where we would pick a different band every week, and Steely Dan was one of them, obviously, and we'd then select some of the top songs, and it was just so fun because we'd spend 2 or 3 hours every week just going through the catalog of the different artists, and what I found from that is I'm finding out music that I didn't even know existed. And that's one of the great things about the community that we have, and certainly you're part of that, and sharing your wisdom and knowledge, and if we all share a little bit, we're all going to grow together. And that's what really is my passion. I love learning new stuff. So that's why I'm here.
That's great. And I think we share that passion because that's why I started the podcast. It was just, sort of a creative outlet for me, but also to be able to share not so much my knowledge. I mean, I don't know everything, and I'm always learning new things about music and discovering music I never knew before, never heard before, even from artists that I was relatively familiar with. So it's just been great. And my goal is to just, talk to some folks, see what they're into, and, share out some shared learning. So here we are.
Love it.
Cool. So why don't we jump into what I thought was an interesting topic? We had been emailing about things to talk about on the episode, and I liked what you sent me, which was maybe we could dig through our 2023 top artists and then our 2023 top songs via our respective Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
why don't you go first? Talk me through your top five artists, and
I will, and let me just tell you a quick backstory on this.
yeah,
I've been on Spotify maybe 3, 4 years, something like that. And but what actually got me, I have a 26-year-old, and when she was in college, and by the way, she went to Madison. When she was in college, she came home one semester and said, "Dad, guess what my number one song was for the year?" So I have no idea. She said it was Bill Withers' "Lovely Day." Well,
oh
it was a
wow,
song that was like back in our era, and I'd
sure.
always loved that song. And so I said, well, how did you know that was your number one song? She said, well, it's on this thing called Spotify. And says, you got to show me this. And so I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. I was on Pandora, one of the other platforms before that. But just the fact that you got this wrapped, I thought was such a cool thing. So every year I look forward to it. And right around Thanksgiving, you start, oh, wow, it's coming out soon. And you get excited.
You start playing stuff that looks cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Try
Yeah.
to game it. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I guess I wouldn't qualify for your podcast if Steely Dan wasn't on the list. But here's the interesting thing: it wasn't number one, and that in a way it surprises me. But the number one artist for me last year was Jamiroquai. I don't know if you're familiar with
Sure.
them,
Yeah.
but I really, and there's a whole backstory in how I found out about them. But that's one of them. Number two was Earth, Wind and Fire. Number three,
Solid
Steely Dan.
choice.
Number four, Swing Out Sister.
Really?
Yeah, and then number five, Chicago. And so, fortunately, this summer I've seen Earth, Wind and Fire in Chicago separately, but I'm gonna see them together uh, in July, and so I'm really looking forward to that. So,
Oh, that sounds like a great show. And like you said, two horn bands, right? Like, what's better than a band with a horn section, right? As far as I'm
Exactly.
concerned,
Right.
yeah. So,
Right.
Swing
Yeah.
Out Sister. Let's dig into that a minute because I'm only familiar with the one single they had out in the '80s. Was it Breakout? Beyond
Hmm.
that,
Yep.
I don't think I've ever heard another Swing Out Sister song. So, what should I be tuning into?
Well, you know what? So anyway, one of the interesting stories, and I think I'm just checking on this for a second. I don't actually think this is the case, but one of the songs I really got into um, from them was called "Not Gonna Change." It's all one word, "Not Gonna Change," which was it goes back to the '80s. You know, that's when they were popular. But it was actually recorded about 10 years ago, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was a huge volcanic eruption in Iceland,
Hmm.
and it wrecked air travel between Europe and the U.S. for at least a couple of weeks. I think maybe a month.
Right.
I don't know. They were supposed to come to the U.S. to tour, and they had put together this band, and they had rehearsed, and they were all set, UK group and all this kind of stuff. And the day before they were going to get on the flight, the volcano erupted, so they couldn't. They
Oh.
had to cancel their tour and everything. Well, they instead of just sitting around on their hands, they went into the studio and they took their show and their group, right? And they put together this album. And so that's one of the it's called Private Dreams, and that's one of the things that I started listening to. But then there was another whole album that isn't on Spotify, and I don't know why. And I couldn't find it on Apple Music either. So I kind of unearthed some of their material, and I think it was when we were preparing for the summer, what we call summer soundscapes, and I was doing a little research, and I guess on YouTube it popped up. The album's called "Get in Touch with Yourself,"
Hmm.
and there's a couple of tracks on there that I had never heard, and just so I think that's one of the reasons why they popped up, simply because I was started listening to them, from that perspective. So some very interesting stuff, and I like that a whole lot. By the way, one other tie-in with Steely Dan is I love this idea. That they were a real studio band. Swing Out Sister, this is, and Steely Dan, and in studio bands, they can do a lot of things that you're not going to do on a stage in front of a live audience. They can have all the overdubs and all that kind of stuff, and I'm quite certain that Corinne Drury, who's the lead singer, did most of the different harmony parts, right? So she'd
Oh.
harmonize with herself. Um, but so when they put together this band and this album, they had to get a backing singer that would kind of match with her voice and be able to do the harmony. And so it's kind of like Steely Dan. They end up creating a whole band, with backup singers and horns and other kind of instruments that they probably wouldn't otherwise use. So there is that kind of interesting correlation, and I've always found that that's kind of interesting. It's not just the fact that it's live, but the fact that they've had to create something for a live audience,
Sure.
that they can't just rely on the studio stuff and the technology to do. So I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's very neat. And I think there's a lot of bands out there that have to sort of struggle to rearrange stuff when they decide to take an album out or certain songs to play live. And there's certain songs that they just can't do because they're just too complex, right? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I'm gonna have to check them out. All right, so drum roll, please. Chad's
Here we
2023
go.
top artists. And any guesses, any wagers on number one? I don't know. Maybe it's Steve. Yeah, I think we should do shirt reveals. So I'm wearing today, which I wore a few weeks ago on another podcast, Becker
Oh,
Fagan and
yeah, I love
Cats.
it. I love it. Yeah, I don't know if I can do this. The risk of I've got Donald and
Nice.
Walter in the earlier. See, you're my hero, Chad, because most people that know me are shocked that Steely Dan wasn't my number one. My daughter was like, "Oh yeah, it's Steely Dan." And she was like, "What?"
I think Steely Dan's been my number one. This is the third year running, and the only reason why they weren't before that is because I think I was just still getting my head around Spotify and
Sure.
listening to so much other stuff, and I just wasn't listening to them on Spotify as much. It was more like in the car on other formats. But all right, let's continue my top five. Number two, once again, no surprise, Donald Fagen got heavily into his solo stuff, the last few years.
Sure.
Uh, Number three is a band called Marvelous Three. I don't know if you're familiar. Alternative band from the mid to late 90s. They sort of came out of the ashes of a couple of other metal bands, actually, from the late 80s. But the lead singer, guitar player, songwriter, producer, his name's Butch Walker, and he's gone on to like this amazing career in music. He's written and produced like Avril Lavigne, SR-71, bunch of other bands and albums that you've probably heard, and he's had a bunch of solo stuff out too. But Marvelous Three was just this trio, bass guitar, drums, and one of my favorite albums of all time. So I think what sort of rocketed them into the number three slot this year was that they released a new album after a 20-something year hiatus. So I think I was just playing that on repeat for weeks. So it kind of messed with the algorithm a little bit. It pushed them up a
You
little
did the
high.
same thing? I mean,
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one that did that.
No, apparently we're not. We're not the only ones. Let's see. Number four, Buffalo Tom. One of my favorite bands of all time, so that makes sense. I still listen to them frequently, and I keep plugging them on my other episodes. But I'll say it again: they have a new album coming out after I think the last one was 2016 or 2017. So I'm very excited about that. And number five was Fountains of Wayne.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
always love them. They kind of tick all the boxes for me. I love catchy. I love a good hook. I love literate songwriting and lyrics and,
Hmm.
nice chord changes and bridges and song structures. And boy, do they deliver on all of those.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
cool.
I'm just making a note here. Marvelous Three and Buffalo Tom, right?
Yeah, check them out for
Okay.
sure.
I will. That's what I love about this stuff is just, is just getting introduced to new artists and new music, and it's amazing.
Yeah, me too. And that's why I'm loving doing the podcast so far. All right,
So,
so
what was your number one Steely Dan song then?
So yeah, let's do. I guess I'll do my top songs and then hand it back to you for yours. But all five of my top songs on Spotify were all Steely Dan.
Well, great.
Uh, yeah, number one, Green Earrings. Number two,
Oh,
Sign In Stranger.
love it.
Yeah, I was listening to Royal Scam a lot last
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
It just never sort of left the rotation. Number three, Gaucho. Still sort of
Yep.
obsessed with that album. Number
Love that.
four, Peg. I'm not sure
Yep.
why, but
Yep.
the sort of left field song for me was number five was the Boston Rag.
Okay.
I don't remember intentionally playing that song so much, but I went and dug into the actual numbers, and it was pretty far ahead of like the number six and seven. So I must have, and I love it. Like I'm not saying it shouldn't
Right.
be there, but it's just I found
Right.
it to be odd. It was just a little weird that it was there and other songs weren't. But that's great. So what were your
Well,
top five?
that's interesting. Sign. See, I thought they played Sign and Stranger the other night, but Green Earrings is one that every time I go to see them in concert, I'm like, please play Green Earrings. It's that's one that, and it's not always in the rotation,
Yeah,
but that's just one that's such a great song live. It's up tempo and everything, and I just love that one. So yeah, and like you said, the whole Royal Scam album is terrific, and maybe my second favorite, although like you said, Gaucho is just awesome, and there's a lot to tuck into on there, but yeah. So in terms of the five, well, the Steely Dan one for me was Black Cow, which is again not a surprise. That's you know people would probably guess that one. The number one song was a shock to me. So I mentioned Earth, Wind, and Fire was in the mix, and there's so many great Earth, Wind, and Fire songs. Well, Serpentine Fire was my number one.
oh
So
wow.
that was the head scratcher because I like it, but I wouldn't put it in my top. I wouldn't say it's my top five songs that I'd have to hear, from Earth, Wind, and Fire. Um, Number four was a Jamiroquai song called "Don't Give Hate a Chance."
Huh.
And that one is amazing. I'd love to do an entire podcast episode on that because it has some very interesting musical elements to it. But anyway, so that was number four. The number two song wasn't even represented on the list of artists, but it's called "The Grid Generation" by a guitar player by the name of Corey Wong. And Corey Wong was actually introduced to me by my daughter. And Grid Generation, I think, I'm not sure if this was a 22 or a 23. I think it was a 23 release.
Hmm,
So that
okay.
might have explained why I played it a lot. But anyway, it's so interesting to me that he or she was listening to Bill Withers, in college, and now I'm listening to some of her stuff. Not all of it, but some of it. So
Same,
and then
same with my daughter.
yeah, the last one is a real interesting one. It again, a 2023 release, and it was called Moonshine by a group called Young Gun Silver Fox. Now, Young Gun Silver Fox is a group I would have never ever heard of, but for our buddy on Twitter, the yacht Eddie, the yacht show guy,
Mhm.
and he has a podcast, and on one of his episodes he profiled them, and I'm like, oh, I gotta listen to this stuff. So I was listening, and then Spotify pulled up just about a year ago, and they said, hey, there's new music from Young Gun Silver Fox. So I listened to it. Here's what I didn't realize: that song was actually written, or at least partially written, by an absolute icon in the music industry who's since passed. His name's Rod Temperton. And Rod Temperton is a guy that was back in the 60s and 70s, played in a band called Heatwave.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
and he was like the keyboard guy, and he wrote most of the songs.
Okay.
Um, but Rod Temperton, here's another podcast episode, right? Rod Temperton wrote some of the most iconic music ever, and most people don't even know who he is or
Hmm.
was. He wrote three songs on both Michael Jackson's Off the Wall and on Thriller, including the title tracks.
Oh wow.
So this is a guy that's got serious chops. Well, he was kind of retired from all this stuff, and the guys from Young Gun Silver Fox kind of were working with them, and they kind of etched out the basis of it probably about 10 years ago. Rod passed away, I think, about 2015, I think. And so, but they didn't even finish the song until just the last year. But that was one that that kind of grabbed my attention. So fun story about that.
Yeah, I need to dig into more of his work. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with it by proxy with Michael Jackson, and um, I mean, Heatwave. Who doesn't love Heatwave? I think I danced to Always and Forever at my prom.
Exactly that. Everybody did back then, right? That was the big slow dance. I know. And the groove line. I
Groove
mean,
Line. Yep.
there's all that other stuff, and
Boogie
so
Nights. Boogie Nights is like I can sing that song
exactly.
in my sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did a thing. We did a little thing for his birthday, where we were kind of profiling some of the different music, and again, I found artists and songs that he wrote that that I had no idea, but he did like just some amazing. He did "Give Me the Night" with George Benson.
Oh wow. I
He
love that
did
song.
yeah. He did he did I think he did "Love Is in Control" by Donna Summer,
Hmm.
right? He did "Spice of Life," Manhattan Transfer. These are all. He did "Sweet Freedom" with Michael McDonald. He did. I'm almost certain he did one with Shaka Khan. I'm trying to come up with it. But it's just amazing all the different songs that he did. And again, that's a topic for another day. But you know that's what I get interested in. You say Rod Temperton, and most people give you a blank stare, and then you start naming
Right.
off the songs. They're like, oh yeah, I know that song.
Yeah. Oh, I love chasing stuff down like that, and figuring out who did what, and I'm real big into behind the scenes, obviously with music. So who played on certain albums, and who wrote things and produced things. So it's very cool. So let's talk a bit about saxophone. I think that was another hot topic. So tell me about your playing and experience. Was it as a kid? Was it as an adult? Did you play in a band? Give me all the details.
Yeah, well, the funny story, or ironic, whatever, odd one to me is, like I said, my dad was a big influence for me. He was actually a drummer at one point, and then mom kind of made him put away the drums, and so he took up the keyboard. And I think almost every night as a kid, I remember him playing something. Either on piano or he had an organ, Hammond organ, and whatever. And he was really big into some of the Latin music, bossa nova stuff, and that sort of thing. So I didn't listen to a lot of kind of, quote unquote popular music at home, mostly listening to the kind of stuff he would play. But when I got to be, I guess it was junior high, when they started instrumental music, he basically grabbed my hand and said, "We're going to get an instrument, for you. So we're going to go to the music store and we're going to get an instrument. You're going to play an instrument." Taking piano lessons like most kids do and all that.
Sure.
And I didn't really like it, but I did it.
Yeah, me either.
Um, so anyway, we happened to know the band director at my school. He was a family friend. He said, go into Mr. Mills and find out what he needs, because if you play an instrument that they need in the band, you're going to have a better chance of playing early. So I went in and band director was real cool, and he was like, "Yeah, we need trombones, right?" So I'm like, okay, that's great. Wrote it down, trombone. So Saturday morning we go off to the music store, and they had a little practice room, and the guy would bring in different instruments. You could try them out and see if you liked them or not. So he said, trombone, let's pick out the trombone. So he pulls it out, and I can't make a sound out of the darn thing. It's just brutal.
It's hard.
Yeah, and so the music guy, the music store guy said, maybe you want to try a sax. So I said, well, bring one out. So he brought out a sax, and I could blow into it and honk, and I could press the keys, right, and make noise. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this. So I go in the next day, and on Monday morning I go into all proud and excited. "Hey, Mr. Mills, I got a sax." And he's like face palm, he's like, "I got more saxes than I know what to do with." So for that first year, I didn't really get a chance to play. I had to kind of be just like in a group lesson or something like that. But I took some private lessons, and and I worked my way through it. And then once I got to, I guess it was eighth grade or whatever, I was able to, to play. And after about a year or so playing alto, I switched to tenor because I just thought that was cooler and I liked it. And, back then we were playing some of the music of Chicago and some of the other, bands, and it was the kind of stuff that tenor you could play in anything you wanted, and so I really got into it at that point. And I was playing a lot in the jazz band. And in fact, when I got in high school, they had like a so I'm in a small state. You have to consider this. I'm in a small state, but they had an all state band, and I had no shot at that. But they had an all state jazz band. I said, you know what? I'm going to try. I'm going to say there's nothing, can't go wrong for trying. I practiced my butt off for months to get to the point where I felt I was going to be capable of auditioning. And sure enough, I got to make the all-state band, and
Oh
I was
wow.
the first kid from my school to do that. They had some other schools that had really deep jazz programs, and they were churning out these really good players left and right. And so it was pretty cool for me to be the first guy to do that. And I actually did it for 2 years, 2 straight years. So that was pretty cool. Like I said, knew I wasn't going to make music my vocation, but I really had a lot of fun with it,
Sure.
and we got to do some pretty cool stuff, and got to go, take trips and play in different organizations, different combos and stuff like that, and got exposed to some really neat things. One of the coolest things was they had a program where over the summer where you could play, and generally the kids that were in that were pretty good players, and then they'd actually bring in professional guys. I mean, professional players that would come in and kind of tutor you.
Hmm.
And then one day we actually got a chance to take a crack at doing some arranging,
Oh
which
wow.
I had never done. And I'll tell you, I'm more of a sax player than a musician, right? So I'm not like some of these guys that knows all the different chord structures and all that, but it was kind of fun to get into that level, and to to kind of play around with it. And then once you arranged it, you got to put it in front of the band, and they would actually play it.
Oh,
So it was kind
cool.
of neat. So we had
Yeah.
some fun with that. But my lasting memory of band was, when we're in high school in marching band. My first experience there was the band director. It seemed like for the first week, every other day, he would say, "Tenors, get out a pencil," and he basically rewrote the trombone parts so that we were covering the trombones because we had terrible trombones. So that's my lasting memory is that. And I think I echo Don Fagen because I know for the longest time he didn't want any trombones in Steely
Right.
Dan.
Yep.
And so when I heard that story, I'm like, yeah, I get it. So that was my background in music.
Nice. I have a very similar path. So when I was in grade school, I started taking guitar because my sister played the guitar, who was, a little bit
Ooh.
older than me, and I just looked up to her, I guess. And I mean, not I guess, I did look up to her, but so third grade, you were allowed to take an instrument, and I took guitar for 2 years. Fifth grade comes around, and I'm bored. I'm not really into the guitar as much as I thought I was going to be. And I think in the fifth grade, you could elect to start doing brass or woodwinds. Well, at the time, I was really into saxophone, so I was like sax for sure. Obviously, they start you out on alto. So I played alto in fifth grade, sixth grade. In sixth grade, they actually were in need of a few players for the junior high marching band. So they pulled me into that because, I guess I was good enough and they
Great.
needed somebody. So I did that. Junior high, I was in marching band, stage band, jazz band, really enjoyed it. And it's kind of funny you mentioned, get your pencils out and changing the charts and giving you trombone parts because my band director was notorious for that. We had a pretty good brass section, I have to
Uh-huh.
say. And a couple of good friends of mine were the two trumpet players, and they were phenomenal. But we were missing certain instruments because, what kid wants to play oboe, right? So there were a few pieces where the band director was like, man, I'm really missing that oboe part. You know what? It's an E flat. It matches up with the alto sax. Here, Sutton. And he'd throw a piece of sheet music on my stand and go, play that. And I was really good at sight reading, which
Oh
I'm not
wow.
anymore. I can't read music to
Yeah.
save my life anymore. But,
Yeah.
I guess when I was a kid, I was really good at it. So he would just throw stuff in front of me and say, hey, play this. And I'd play it. And he would say, okay, yeah, that's your part from now on. I needed that.
Wow.
I
That's
needed that counter melody or whatever it was
yep.
in this piece.
Hmm.
So did a lot of that. Got to play baritone sax on a few things because we
Oh
didn't have a
wow.
bari. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because I remember this distinctly. There was a girl named Monica, and we were always fighting for first chair alto parts because
Oh
we were
wow.
both equally good players and
Hmm.
good readers. So when I started branching out and doing this other stuff, she was like, "Yes," because she got to be first chair and didn't have to fight me for it. So it was pretty funny. And then I went to high school in Atlantic City in South
Okay.
Jersey, and Atlantic City High School's marching band. I don't know about nowadays, but in the '70s, the '80s, they were one of the top marching bands in the country. Like they would travel all over the place and win all kinds of competitions and everything. But with that came grueling practice and preparation that I just wasn't ready for. So when I went into high school, I met with the band director and he was like, we'd love to have you join. And I was like, no thanks. Because I had talked to a few kids that had
Sure.
been into it. And
Sure.
you had to be there like 2 hours before school started on weekdays. You had to give
Yep.
up weekends. You were always
Yep.
traveling. And they just said, it's worth it. It's fun, but it's a lot of work. And I was just not prepared to do that. I guess I just kind of punked out. So
We
that
had
kind
a
of ended my
competitive
saxophone
band.
career.
We had a competitive band my first year, and you're right. I mean, we would do at least 2 hours of playing, during school hours, and then right after school, we'd practice for 3 hours a night. And so you weren't getting home until 7 o'clock at night or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, and then like you said, all Saturday and Sunday, normally you're on a bus going somewhere and playing for the games, but then you got a competition in 2 hours, 3 hours away or something. So yeah, it was pretty crazy, and that was big for a year, and then after that, we just kind of mostly pulled out of competition. So, but that's where we did the other stuff like the jazz band and stuff like that. So.
I really love jazz band. We played a lot of fun stuff, and the cool
Hmm.
thing was for the stage band portion, which was mostly all the same kids that were in jazz band. The director of that always tried to keep some current radio stuff in the mix. So
Right.
we played Beat It by Michael Jackson. I'm dating myself here, but this is like 84, 85, right? So
Sure.
we did Beat It. We did the theme from Ghostbusters.
Oh wow.
We did She Blinded Me with Science by Thomas Dolby, which was awesome. Yeah, yeah, we did a lot of really cool stuff.
So do
So,
you do
yeah.
a little bit off topic here, but do you do something called hurdles on online? It's
No.
well, so we'll have to talk about this offline, but
Oh,
I just threw that out there because you had were mentioning a lot of 80s songs, and so they have different genres and different decades and all this kind of stuff. It really, I think, from the 50s to the present, uh, and then some of them were kind of cross genre, but basically they'll play like one or like maybe say 2 seconds at a time of a song, and then the trick is to try to ID the song as
right.
quickly as you can, so um, it's fun, but it's a lot more fun if you get other people to join you,
Sure.
especially people that have kind of similar taste and similar, experience, because that's where it really kind of gets to be competitive and fun and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's spelled Heard,
Yes,
right? It's kind of like
that's it.
Wordle for yeah. I've seen it. I
Just
just
like
haven't played it, but now I'm gonna have to go give it a whirl.
give it a check. So there's actually one that's called hurdledecades.com.
Okay.
Like you said, spelled HEARDLE. And that's the one. And then they've also got band specific. So if you're into, I know they've got some Duran Duran, they've got Queen, they've got, oh, can't, I don't normally do the band specific ones because they really go into the deep cuts, but the other ones that, they'll have, like disco, and they'll have rock and stuff like that. So you might enjoy that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I'll definitely have to check that out. That's right up my alley.
Yes.
My wife and I have been watching. It's kind of lame, but we've been doing the new version of Name That Tune that's been on
Oh, how
TV.
is that? I watched that a couple years ago. I haven't seen it lately. How is that?
It's okay.
Yeah.
I have to say the band that they have that plays all of the different music live is phenomenal. Like, there's nothing they can't cover that doesn't sound good and doesn't
Oh
sound
wow. Yeah.
90% like the original song. So I'm
Wow.
very impressed with
That's
that.
amazing.
It's Jane Krakowski is hosting it. She's
Okay.
great.
Yes.
And I don't know if I didn't watch it up until recently, and I don't know if it's just this season or if it's been the new reboot or whatever, but it seems like they're doing all celebrities and they're playing for different charities. So,
Oh, okay. That's nice.
which
Yeah.
is great. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's fun because I'm a name guy. My wife a lot of times will get stuff before I do, but she can't get to the name as quickly as I do, so she gets mad at me,
Yeah.
and I get mad at her because she'll know a song right away, and I'm like, it took me a few extra notes to get that one, but it's fun. It's fun. So I think Hurdle's gonna be another cool
Yeah,
thing.
do it
Yeah.
together. You might have some fun with that.
Yeah, for
Like I
sure.
said, that's when it's really fun is when you're doing it with somebody else and it's like a little semi-competitive thing.
Yes, we're very competitive with each other. Cool. So let's talk a bit about Steely Dan, because I think that was one of the first things that we connected, on with Twitter. I'm still making stupid memes, a couple a week at this point, and posting them, and it's fun. It's gotten me more interaction on Twitter than I ever hoped to have, and it's just unfortunate that it's this era of Twitter that I'm sort of having so much fun with, because it would have been great. Yeah, but I think, you and I have connected on that, and there's so many cool people on Steely Dan Twitter that just posts, trivia and fun stuff
Oh,
and
yeah.
pictures, and, what are some highlights? And I guess, tell me a bit about when you first started listening to them, and how you really got into them, and, how often do you listen to Steely Dan now?
Well, yeah, that's a good, that's a lot of interesting elements to that. I think my first experience, and this will date me a little bit, but when I was in college when Asia came out, and my roommate was a big album guy. I wasn't. I just didn't. That wasn't just something I did, you know. But he brought home or brought back the Asia album, and I think I wore that darn thing out. It was just incredible, and I just couldn't get over every single track there. And like I said, I think a lot of it is that if you look at that album, they got a lot of sax in there, you know. And for a guy, I was still playing back then. I played in college for a little bit, and so that was right up my alley. There, you know, outside of Chicago and maybe some Earth, Wind, and Fire, you didn't really have a lot of popular music back then that emphasized the sax. Now, going into the 80s, I think it got a little bit more popular, right? And
Yeah,
you started hearing a lot more songs that had saxes in them. But back in the mid to late 70s, it was mostly guitar oriented rock. That's what they were playing. And so,
sure.
you know, thanks to Donald and Walter, rest in peace, you know, they saw fit to actually bring in not just sax players, but I mean, highly accomplished jazz guys that you know had really terrific chops and blend that into you know their popular music. And so that was something that really kind of pulled me in, and got me to be a hardcore, you know, hardcore listener of their music. I'll say, you know, then of course it was like 3 years later, and Gaucho came out, and you know, same thing, and then they took a hiatus for 20
Yeah.
years, and they didn't
Right.
nothing, right? It was just complete, you know, radio silence for 20 years. And you know, that was tough because obviously back in that day, right, you listened to what was on the radio. I mean, that was, you know, you either got an album or you listened to what was on the radio, you know.
Sure.
So it was and obviously I had Asia and I had Gaucho and I was listening to them a lot, but you know, it's not the same if there's not, you know, new music kind of going in there. So I'll vividly remember uh, I was at work one day and one of my coworkers said, well, I don't know how we got around it, but they were talking about Steely Dan. He said, well, you know, they just introduced a new album, don't you? And I'm like, what? I never had, you know, never knew. So it was like, you know, Two Against Nature. And I'm like, oh my God. And I literally left work and I drove over to the CD store, I guess at the time,
Right.
and you know, and bought the album. And I was so excited to put that thing in. And I have to tell you, I felt a little let down after I listened to it because I didn't really get it. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't what I was expecting or what I was hoping for. Time has kind of cured that to the point where now I enjoy it. But you know, at the time, it was kind of like, you know, this isn't what I was thinking it was going to be. You know, but yeah. So that was a little bit about my, you know, my history, my background in terms of listen. Well, obviously, I must listen to it somewhat because it's on my Spotify, and you know, I guess I I guess how I consume music these days is a couple different ways. I will set up every year, and I start over. So it's January, and you know, I my 2023 playlist was about 500 songs long.
Wow.
But I started in January, and as I would hear new music or old favorites, I would just add it to the list, and it just, you know, would grow. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing, throwing out 2023 and starting fresh. And so right now, I don't even know if there's any Steely Dan on there, but you know,
Sure.
it's stuff that I've heard that's new. That's like, oh yeah, I want to capture that. I want to get that. Um, and then there will be times when you know, when you're in a certain mood or you're on a road trip or something like that. And so you'll just go in and you'll put in, oh, okay, let me put in my Steely Dan playlist or my Chicago or my Earth, Wind and Fire, whatever, you know, and kind of do it that way. So there's a couple different ways I do it, but a lot of that happens to be, you know, it's like as you kind of building this list. And every year it seems to get longer. I think the 2022 one was maybe, I don't know, 300 songs, and you know, so I don't have any idea what this year is gonna bring. You know, hopefully it'll be a big list.
Yeah, it sounds that way. I've been doing the same thing. So I'll make playlists based on a mood or a band or, you know, whatever the case may be. But what I've been doing the last couple of years is just sort of keeping a sort of holding tank playlist around. So like you're saying, as I find new songs, if somebody recommends something and I want to just bookmark it to go back and listen to later, if I hear something completely randomly in the grocery store, like, oh man, I haven't heard that song in 20
Right.
years. I'll make a note in my phone, or just, if I'm in Spotify anyway, I'll throw it in the playlist. And then when I get to about, I'm not doing it by ear, but when I get to like 200, 250 songs, somewhere in that neighborhood, I'll cut it and start a new one. Because I feel
That's
like
probably
then,
the smart idea. I should probably do that because it does get a little unwieldy when they
yeah,
get longer.
for sure. That's why I started doing it. The first one that I built like that was, I think, 600 songs, and I was like, I'm never gonna get through this if I try to go back and listen to it. So, yeah, that's exactly the reason. But yeah, that's kind of funny that we kind of do the same thing. And I was making playlists when I was doing all the music challenges on Twitter, and that's great, and that was a fun community. But it started to feel almost like a chore to me to have to
Yes.
make these things, and I was trying to stay in two, three, four a month because I didn't want to offend anybody and not do their challenge because I was being
That's a
invited to
lot
all
of
this
work.
stuff. It is, and it was a lot of fun, but I just had to kind of taper off. And I haven't done one. I think I did one maybe. Oh, I did the Christmas one with Jim Bricker. He's always does a
Yep.
Christmas one, and that was easy because
Yep.
it was only 12 days, and
Yep.
it was a fun kind of theme. But yeah. So, and I kind of want to
Isn't
get
that
back into that.
interesting now that they have, like you said, there's probably 15 or 20 of them going at any given time. And like you said, I had trouble kind of doing it. So I'll look at them, and, if it looks like it's really real, there was one, wow, what was the one? But some of them are really, really challenging. And I don't normally have that much mental energy. Like you said, if you got to do it
I
for
hear
30
you.
consecutive days, it's like,
Right.
so yeah, but that's fun, and it's I forgot that we had both been doing that. I know that I guess I was probably I would say probably for 23 I was maybe in on maybe half or two-thirds of them. I think probably the year before I was in on most of them.
Yeah.
So just like you kind of get to a point where you have to kind of pull back a little bit, but
Yeah, one of the ones that was fun, and I don't know if anybody would resurrect it. I don't think I want to run it myself. Maybe this at some point in the future. But it was the 30 days, 30 DJs. I don't know if you were.
oh no, I don't.
Yeah, so it was every week, or was it every day? I think it was every day for the month. Somebody would be the DJ,
Oh, nice.
and they had to pick one band and make a playlist of however many songs. I did 30 to keep the theme, 30, 30, 30.
Right.
And sort of, it was free form. There was like no real format to it, but it was just pick a band, turn everybody in the challenge onto that band. And, if you want to, don't just publish a playlist, but share pictures, share links, share articles, share
I do
memories,
remember this.
whatever
Yeah.
it was. So I did one for Buffalo Tom,
Oh, wow.
which was really fun because
Right.
I whip that playlist out all the time when somebody's like Buffalo who, and I'm like, here, playlist, go listen. I'll link the Buffalo Tom one in the show description, but I'll send it to you
Great.
since you
Yeah.
mentioned that you wanted to check them out. And then the other one I did was Elizabeth and the Catapult, which is not really a band. I think it started out as a band, but it's just a solo artist. Her name's Elizabeth Zyman,
Oh, wow.
and she's just amazing.
Hmm.
So I was trying to bring awareness to some of these artists that people don't really usually know too
Sure.
much about.
Yeah. That's great.
So I thought that was kind of cool. That was a fun one.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fun, and we'll have to think about that. Well, let me throw this out as an idea. So, I can't think of her name right off the top of the, but they started one for February that is a different instrument every day.
Oh,
Well, supposedly. But what they did is the first week is like keyboard, the second week is guitar, the third week is percussion, and then everything else climbed in the fourth week. So I sent a note and I said, where's the sax week? And then I thought about it and I said, I bet you have a better plan. I bet the rest of the year. So starting in March, we're going to spend the whole rest of the year doing sax. And of course, she laughed. So it was like one day was like all wind instruments or all, maybe it's all reeds. So Monday was brass and Tuesday was reeds and whatever, something like that. I'm like, that's not going to work for me. But A couple of, I don't know that I did it quite as much last year because I was traveling a little bit, but in 22, so International Saxophone Day is on, don't quote me on this, it's something like November the 6th. And it corresponds with the birthday of Adolphus Sax, who was the inventor of the saxophone.
Right.
So what I did, considering it was like the 6th, and so it was just about the start of the month, is I said, okay, we're going to do an entire week for sax. But I should have involved you in it because we could have had a boatload of fun. Where we so the
Absolutely.
first day I took it was all soprano, the second alto, the third tenor, the fourth bari, and then I think I did maybe some genre specific. Oh no, one day was for like ensemble. So so you're going to feature when you've got the entire sax section together, and stuff like that. And then the last day was kind of free form, do whatever you want. But that's the kind of thing that we could do sometime. We don't have to do it in November, but we could do something like that and have some fun with it,
Yeah,
and
that would be cool.
so.
Love it. Anything to get more sax out there, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly.
I still
People,
have my sax.
I
I
do
haven't.
too. It's a little dusty.
Yeah, I haven't
And
played it in 20 years or more, but it's
yeah.
there. It's in the house.
So when my daughter, and this is one of my regrets, as a parent, you have to decide when to intercede. Like my dad definitely interceded and said, "This is not up to you. We are going to get you an instrument." I praise him every day for that decision. It changed my life, literally. Well, so I kind of, my daughter knew how important it was to me. So it wasn't an option for her. So she knew she was going to get an instrument. But when we went in for the thing, instead of saying, I think she should have a sax, I just let the powers that be kind of work with her. And they gave her the different instruments and they decided clarinet would
Hmm.
be her instrument. And I look back on that, I think, I probably should have interceded because I think she would have had a lot more fun if she had played the sax. So she played throughout high school and had a lot of fun with it. And that's when I would get my horn out because she'd be like, Dad, I just don't, I can't get this part and whatever. And so I'd get my horn out, we'd play together, the B flat clarinet, B flat tenor. And so there were times when she wouldn't practice. She says, I'm not going to practice unless you get the horn out. Oh, okay. But it was kind of fun. And I did that. The other situation was a corporate thing in 1994. It was for a centennial of my company, and which is headquartered in Minneapolis. And they put together a corporate marching band for a parade that happened to be going on in July, I think. And we were going to be out there for some conference, and so they sent it out to, I was still in Delaware at the time, and they sent out and said, hey, if you want to play, let us know, and we'll have an instrument for you. So they sent out the music, and we got there, and basically it was a 1 day gig, right? So we got there, and we're there for the conference, and then I don't know what day it was or whatever, but we literally got our instruments. We didn't really have uniforms per se, like a typical marching band, but we had matching T-shirts and whatnot. And then we practiced for like 3-4 hours, and then boom, we went out into the parade, and there was about 400 people. It was the biggest band I was ever in, like
Oh
400
wow.
people in this band. And it was a bolt. I got to tell you, it was so much fun,
Oh, it
and
sounds like it.
yeah, so that kind of scratched my itch there.
Nice. That's awesome. So, one last topic before we wrap it up, because you had mentioned that you were going to see a concert. So, why don't you tell me who you saw, and you had a little story to go along with that. I'd love to hear more about it.
So, by the way, are you going to be going to the Steely Dan Eagles tour this year? Do you know?
I'm not. I missed my opportunity. They were in New York and New Jersey back in I think
Oh, yeah.
December, and I just was on the fence. And tickets were so expensive, and I'm kicking myself. I should have gone, but I couldn't justify spending all that money to see a 45-minute greatest hits set.
That's the thing that the set's like about, I think it's like maybe 10 or 12 songs. It's not a
Yeah,
very long set.
yeah.
So they're coming to Chicago in about a month, and I like said like you, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't have tickets yet. I might. But anyway, there's a band out here in Wisconsin. The city of Madison is located in Dane County, and so the name of the band is Steely Dan. And so they are actually very, very good. The members, it's not a standing organization. In other words, they're all in different groups, right? They play in different groups and whatnot, but they get together several times a year. And when I say several times a year, I'm sure they practice a lot, but they get together several times a year, and then they'll go and tour in different locations throughout the state. And what I think is awesome is that they've built the band to almost exactly replicate the Steely Dan touring band. So they've got
Mhm.
the horn section, they've got the rhythm section, they've got two keyboard guys, they've got two guitar players, and they've got the female backing singers, right? So they've got the whole thing. It's about 13, 14 members total. And one of the guys apparently has done a phenomenal job of mimicking the arrangements. So the arrangements of the live Steely Dan music, is a little different in many cases than the charts that were on the albums. And so this team or this guy, I think, has really done a phenomenal job of mimicking very accurately, and even some of the soloists, like the guitar player in Kid Charlemagne. I mean, he nails that Larry Carlton solo. It's phenomenal. And not many guitar players. I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible to do because I've seen a lot of other guys cover it, but it's still pretty talented for a guy to be able to do that. So anyway, so they were. The weird story is that I was traveling and I was going to be flying back into Milwaukee about 2 weeks ago, and they were playing the very next night. So I said, you know what? My flight's not getting into midnight. I'm just going to stay over. Milwaukee's about 2 hours from where I live. I'm going to stay over and I'm going to catch the show the next night. So I was all set to do that, and then we get this horrific storm, with like a foot and a half of snow and blizzard conditions and all that. So they canceled the show and they rescheduled it. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to drive now. I'm not sure. It was like on Thursday, and I'm not sure I'm going to drive down. But I saw that they were playing up in Green Bay just this last Saturday, so it was like that's a 25-minute drive for me. That's a slight piece of cake. So. Because I got tickets late, because I was going to be doing the Milwaukee show, I had to sit up way up in the balcony, up pretty high. I'm like, that's fine. I don't care. I don't need to be right up front. But so I'm like one of the first people there. That's just one of my fatal flaws as a human. I'm always early for stuff. So I'm one of the first people in it. And the usher's like, show me the seat. And, he's like, well, you're pretty far up, but it's actually pretty good sonically. That's where the sound goes. And I like sitting up there and da 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 da. Okay, that's fine. The side benefit is that because I was kind of at the back of the group, I could stand up. And the band starts playing, and I need to move. I need to groove to those songs. And when they're doing Pretzel Logic, that's a very drum driven track, and I'm going along with the drums, and when they kind of wrapped up the show with Kid Charlemagne, which is just a phenomenal, live one. Josie, which is terrific, maybe one of my favorite songs. And then they did Reelin' in the Years, and that's always one that kind of brings the house down. Well, as they're wrapping up Reelin' in the Years, I'm kind of nudging the guy next to me, and I said, "My old school's going to be the encore." And he looks at me, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're right. They haven't played that one yet." And so, sure enough, they go into that. And in my old school, to me, it's either that or Kid Charlemagne for the encore. It's got to be
Yep.
one of those two, and then I'm happy, right? So I'm up doing all this stuff and really getting into the music, and half of the crowd is kind of sitting on their hands and whatever. So not everybody is quite as exuberant as I am, and so when the concert ends, we're filing out, and I'm one of the last people out because I'm sitting way up high, and I'm kind of starting to get to the exit, and I hear, sir, excuse me, sir, and I'm like, oh, shit. This could be bad, So I just kept walking with, like, maybe he's not talking to me, and he's like, sir, I need to talk. So and it was the usher. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get kicked out, or they're gonna say somebody complained about, what I was doing, or invited not to come back again.
Right,
One
right.
of these things, and I'm like, oh, geez. And the guy says, I just want to tell you, I was really thrilled to see that you got so much excitement out of the show. I'm like, woo! So we talked for about 10 minutes, and he's seen, the same band when they've cycled around some of the other venues and all that kind of stuff. So we had that kind of commonality. But I was like, boy, I dodged a bullet there. Thought I got kicked out.
Well,
So,
nice.
Kat, if we're ever at a concert and you see some goofball up in the back, just going crazy, it's probably me. You can like pretend you don't ignore me, or pretend you don't know me, and I'll be cool with that.
I'll be in the back giving you the high sign.
There you go.
Like, I see you. That's awesome. Well, great. Anything else you wanted to cover? Anything you wanted to bring up or talk about?
I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to the rest of your series, and like I said, hopefully we can connect on some other projects as we go forward. Like I said, there's always new stuff that comes out,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're um, my partner and I are in the midst of negotiating, and by that I mean I'm suggesting, and she's giving me all the reasons why we shouldn't do it. But last year we did a program with different artists. And so we're thinking about, doing the same thing again, but again with other groups. So, do any of these names sound familiar to you? Uh, Average White Band,
Oh, yeah.
uh, Hall and Oates, Doobies, Michael McDonald, uh, and maybe some other ones in here that are less familiar. Johnny Hates Jazz, Basha
Oh,
and
I know Johnny Hates Jazz.
Bianco. We might do Wang Chung, Tears for Fears, stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're thinking. We've got the kind of some of the basics on there, but we'll let you know. And if we're going to do that, we'll let you know. Like I said, we're still negotiating, and we don't know the what, when, how, and whatnot. But it was kind of fun
Well,
last year, and we might continue doing it again this year.
that, that sounds great. And I
Maybe we'll have
heartily.
to. Maybe, in light of tonight's conversation, maybe we're going to have to add in the Marvelous Three and Buffalo Tom
I was
to the
just gonna
mix.
say I heartily vote for Average White Band, one of my favorites, and they don't get as much love anymore. I mean, old guys like us, I'm sure, but the kids, I don't think know them as much. So maybe it's time to do some re-education.
Yep. Another good sax-oriented group in
Oh,
there,
yeah,
so yeah.
great. Well, Dave,
Okay,
thanks
all
for
right.
being here. Appreciate you coming on, and it's great talking to you.
Have a
And
great evening.
all right, talk to you soon.
Okay.